see.
So something interesting that I looked into this week was about adults over the age of 50 and 60 and the difference between single adults versus married versus cohabitating.
Mhm.
And something I found was that the amount of cohabitating adults over the age of 50 has risen 75% since 2007.
So when you say cohabitating, this means like platonic, non-sexual relationships or
I believe it can include that, but mostly what I was looking at were adults over the age of 50 who were in a relationship. Remember, these are baby boomers, and
Mhm.
baby boomers were brought up to believe that you only lived together after marriage,
Okay.
at least the majority of them. And so the statistic includes people who are just in a relationship or a partnership of some sort. Because I'm finding that a lot of adults over the age of 60 are getting into relationships for companionship.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of those numbers were even over the ages of 70 and 80. They just didn't want to be alone anymore. And it really was kind of sad to think about getting to that age in life and not wanting to be alone and wanting to have a partner.
It's funny you mention it, and I'm like looking up right now on my phone. There's a documentary that came out about this place in Florida called The Villages. And of course, I can't remember, but it takes place in the villages in Florida. And what it is this retirement community where they all move. It's like the largest retirement community in America. And what it does, it follows one lady who's over the age of 60. I believe she's over the age. She went through two husbands. Her second husband had just died and she's now widowed again. So it follows her in her pursuit of love. And it's interesting you say that because I always wonder, like, okay, we all assume people over the age of 50 or 60 are no longer sexual because they're past families. We assume once women hit, well, I assume once women hit menopause, there's no sexual desire. Men are busy having sex with 20 something year olds, so it's just like things dry up. But watching this documentary, I was like, oh, okay, so even past, I guess you would consider our prime, we still desire love. We still desire partnership. So do you think it's just rooted in the generational aspect of it because they're baby boomers, or is it just something natural in us where we just want a partnership even till the very end? Like, what is your point of view on that?
I think we want a partnership to the end, but I think what happened was that the baby boomers, when they were growing up, didn't talk about these things. Their
Hmm.
parents did not talk to them about sex the way that the baby boomers talk to the Gen Xers and the way that the Gen Xers talk to the millennials. It's
Hmm.
a open conversation now. And I know for me personally, my mother was extremely open in the conversations. I knew everything there was to know about sex before the age of 10.
Wow. See,
But
I
in
did not.
it,
It's, and that's
but
interesting.
my mother, who is a baby boomer, is different though, because she worked in sexuality when I was a child. And so she was very open with having these conversations with me. Now, not everyone's parents were like that.
Yeah. My mother, she's a reverend now. My dad, he's deceased, but he was a cop growing up. And growing up, they never talked about sex. I remember in elementary school, well, not accidentally, I don't know if it was accidentally, but I came across my dad's porn collection and I took it to school for show and tell. And my teacher was mortified when I took out this book of like little porno covers with these erect penises in front of a third grade class. I'm like, this is from my dad. He's so proud. He watches these all the time. That's how I was first introduced to sex. And even after that, my mother bought a cartoon book about puberty and how the body grows. But that being said, there was never a conversation about sex face to face, about love or any of that. I literally had to learn about sex and love through movies and television
Oh,
shows
I
and
think a
hear
lot of
it through
people did.
friends. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a shame, really,
Yeah. Like,
because
did you
so
have
many
sex
people did that.
education as well?
Oh, yeah. In
Okay.
fact, my school had sex education because my mother brought it into the school system.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So speaking of, our obvious topic today is going to be about love over the age of 60 and maybe a little sex. We might throw a little sex in there for you listeners.
Because who doesn't want to have sex? I mean, even if you're older, like people need to stop thinking that just because you age, the sexual desire is gone. It's the stupidest thought ever. It's like
Exactly.
we do to older people what some people do to women once they have babies. Like that whole Madonna syndrome thing, whatever. It's like, oh, they're old, they're innocent, they're perfect. They can't possibly be sexual. They can't possibly want love. No, that's not it. It's only for us young people, for us, with ambition. It's so stupid. It's so stupid.
It's absurd. I agree. So our guest today is going to be Dr. Denise LaRosa. She is a DOM, which is a doctor of Oriental medicine. She's worked in the field of acupuncture, Ayurvedic medicine, nutrition, sexuality, and now is the bereavement manager at Wilshire Hospice. Um, and part of the
And she's
reason,
your mom.
and she's my mom, in case you didn't catch the last name. But part of the reason of having her come on today was because we wanted to do this episode where we talked about love over the age of 60. Obviously, my mother's over the age of 60, hence why she's coming on today. But I thought it would be really interesting because she can talk about it from a personal point of view, but also a professional point of view with her background. Um, Especially all the sexuality stuff. And, it's funny when I was sitting down with her ahead of time to talk to her about some of the questions, some old memories popped up of when I was a kid. And she would come home after a long day at work and we'd have dinner, and maybe I would have a friend over for dinner. And she had this little model of a vagina
Oh
that
my
she would
God.
take to work, and she'd pop it up on the table and be like, "Girls, do you know all the parts of the vagina?" I'm like, "Huh?"
I love that so freaking much. Versus other families. Well, see, I like that your mother taught you the scientific and everything about it, because
Mhm.
there are some families out there where grown men still call penises the Willy Wonker. My Willy Wonker hurts. I'm like, you're 35 years old still calling it a Willy Wonker? It's a penis. Just call it a penis.
I've never
Like,
heard it called a Willy Wonker.
it's just one example of a name, but there's a lot of people out there that have nicknames for their genitalia because they're so uncomfortable with calling it what it is, because they're
Right.
so uncomfortable with sexuality. And it's so weird because I feel like it damages some of us,
I
especially as
agree.
we age and we're uncomfortable with talking about sex for what it is.
Absolutely. All right. So, with that said, on that note, let's bring in Dr. LaRosa, who we are going to call Denise, though.
Okay. Hello, I'm really happy to be here today. Thank you.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you
Yeah,
for
thank you
coming
for inviting
on.
me. Yeah, what a great program.
Thank you. Well, it's all because of your wonderful daughter. Her mission is to help everyone have healthy relationships. And I see where she's getting her mindset, her vibes from,
That's for
basically.
sure. Yes, the apple doesn't fall too far from the branch, right?
So,
So,
we're going to jump right in with some
yeah, let's
questions.
ask some
Okay,
questions.
let's go for it.
Yeah. Um, I have so many questions, but obviously we only have so much time, so we're going to keep it somewhat limited. But
Okay.
I want to start with some generalization, talking about the differences from dating in your 20s, your 30s and 40s to now, because when we talk about dating when we're younger, 20s, we're still exploring ourselves. We're not really sure who we are often. 30s and 40s, you have a family, maybe you're just coming out of a divorce. But now, as a mature adult, you
At
aren't
times.
looking to start a family. And
No.
so your goals have changed. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about how that affects dating in your 60s.
Well, you know, women, when we're taught when we're young that I use the word attractors, that we have to attract people because that's the structure that I grew up under. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of women and men, but mostly women, have felt that a lot, especially in my 20s and my teens and my 20s and 30s, that women are meant to attract. And we're meant to attract people so we have financial security, safety, a relationship. We were based on our relationships. If you could get a man, then you were worthy, you know, and that, I mean, it's really sad, but that's the structure that I grew up in. That, you know, we are attracting, we are constantly trying to be attractive and attract people. And, you know, let's admit it, it's thrilling, it's fun. But and it served a purpose for getting married, having children. And then as you mature, you know, after you have your children, you realize that, well, that's not all that life is about. And I don't want to be just known for what I can attract. And it's really sad because then as we get older into our, you know, like past menopause in the 50s and 60s, we become unseen because we are no longer looked at as the attractor anymore. We're not out there just trying to attract people. And we're not looked at as being able to produce children to serve a purpose that way. So your dating changes and your attraction to people changes. And I've heard a lot from women 50 and older how, and especially going into their 60s, how they don't feel seen anymore. And a lot of women get very depressed during that time. Or they try to act younger because that's the structure we grew in. So it's very different. My 30s was very much because I already had my two children. My 30s were about exploring my sexuality and feeling the power of being able to be sexual. Remember, birth control came out then. I didn't have to worry about getting pregnant. Yay. So it was, yeah. So it was kind of fun experimenting and realizing the power of sexuality and having control over my own sexuality was very powerful during the 30s.
Was there a shift like in your mindset as soon as birth control came out, whereas before you were kind of like maybe even walking on eggshells, like you said, you don't want to get pregnant, at least
Yes,
unexpectedly.
yes.
So did your attraction then change after birth control? Like, did you find yourself being more attracted to people you normally wouldn't be attracted to or situations? Like, did it make you freer in your whole
Yes,
life? Awesome.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
It gave women, myself, and even it gave us a sense of freedom.
Okay.
Um, and then, you know, of course, STDs came in and AIDS came in after that, you know, so, but we still had to be careful. But at the
Mhm,
same time, it freed us up
mhm.
immensely to experiment a little bit more with our sexuality and understand the power of sex and not just be afraid of it because you didn't want to get pregnant.
Mhm,
Very, very different.
mhm. Especially for today, since I feel like there's been a big shift. 'Cause women are a lot more independent, especially nowadays, as far as
Yes.
work and ambition and whatnot. Whereas when you were growing up, from what I understand from what you were saying, it was always pushed. You need to make yourself pretty and find a
Yes.
job. Even to
Yes.
this day, my sister, I feel like I don't know how, I can't I don't want to make a blanket statement, but I know my mother raised my sister very traditional. Even to this day, my sister's like, I need to find myself a nice black man, have a nice traditional family, and then do
Right.
that. And I still see that while that's great, it's like fighting against modern times where it's women are allowed to do whatever they want. Not that they're allowed, but they can do as much or whatever they want to do. So it's like, how does like my question is, do you see things shifting for women who are older in the future as far as like your mother or your grandmother when they were like your age then?
Oh, yes, most definitely. I did have discussions with my mother in her 80s about, the differences of our lives. They felt very bound by their tradition.
Okay.
I came from a strict Catholic Italian family, very conservative. And they stayed with husbands whether they were happy or not. There was no choice.
Mhm.
And they saw that now, as women in my generation, we started to have choice. And now the next future generations, even like my daughters, there's huge choice for women of when they're going to have their families, because I'm not against having a family and having children brought immense joy in my life. But also getting to the point of feeling my own power and my sexuality, took a lot of challenges, and defying what was being presented. I was fighting for women's reproductive rights when a time was, they saw that as a threat to families. It's not a threat to families at all.
Not really at all. It's just you want to be
No,
free to make your own decisions and your
it's
own
free to make your
choices.
own decisions and choices.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So now that you are dating over the age of 60, we don't really want to share your age with everyone. We'll just say over.
Yeah.
What do you find that
You look
your
great though. I will say that.
Oh,
So
thank you.
great genes, Andrea.
I know, I'm so lucky.
Thank you.
I know our listeners can't see her, but if you follow us on YouTube, you will be able to see her in the clip that goes up. I definitely suggest go checking her out. She is single. I am a matchmaker, clearly. Anyways, back to my question. What do you think, though, now that you are over the age of 60, is maybe one or two of the most important things you look for? Obviously, it's not marriage. Obviously, you're not, looking to have a family. You're not looking for somebody who's open to that. So what do you look for in a partner now?
Well, it's very, very different because over the years, I've really tried to work on my spiritual maturity, because I want something more than, awareness is more than just our bodies. And I'd like to go beyond that. I feel the best kind of love is one that can awaken my soul, can give me peace of mind, and can ignite that fire within my heart. That's basically what I'm really looking for right now. And someone who I did, Ken, and see that the villages in Florida, I saw that documentary too.
Okay.
And I thought it was fun to see that people were enjoying themselves. But in my life, I want to go beyond that. I want to get back to my community. I want to be of service.
Yeah.
And which I feel I am, because I'm still teaching. I'm still out there in the community. And I really feel that I'd like a partnership, like Andrea was talking about before, a partnership that, because of our own growth together, we spread that to our families, our friends, and then to our community. And, I'm going to say it, but I think it's kind of shallow to just think about, I just want to have fun the rest of my life, because I feel older people like myself have so much to offer.
Yeah.
And we're losing the sharing of the wisdom to the younger generations, right?
Yes.
Where you
Especially
sit around and tell stories.
I 100% agree. I 100%
Yeah.
agree, because I feel like without the sharing of the stories, we are doomed to make the mistakes that you guys have probably gotten over, remedied, and moved on from. But now we're back making those exact same mistakes
We're
again,
doing the
because
same thing.
especially I noticed like in the workforce, I notice it has nothing to do with dating, but I can see it bleeding over into dating. There is this ageism in all industries, I feel like.
Yes.
Whereas once you're past a certain age, you're like, oh, you're stupid, you're slow, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And I'm just like, they have literally decades of experience in this. Yeah, there might be new technology,
Yes.
but it's like when you go to a supermarket and something happens and a person, they can't use the calculator and they're like confused or whatever. It's kind of like that in a way. Without the knowledge of love, of relationships, of everything, without the sharing of those stories, we're doomed.
Right.
We're really doomed. I do have one random question though. You said you want a partner now to be able to give back to the community, to be able to have do volunteer work with. Because you've already had your kids, you've already had your family, and you mentioned that it's not all about having fun. has your ambitions towards relationships changed because you're getting
Yes.
older? Where it's not about, oh, we need to have kids. Is it really focused on the partnership and
Yeah.
not the sexuality or the fun or things like that? Like,
Oh, no, no, no. I think passion's still there. That's when I
okay,
said ignite the fire in my heart.
okay,
That means passion. And passion is different. It's deeper. It's
mhm,
a passion that, intimacy comes in so many forms,
okay,
because physically people change. And this is something that changes. Women's sexuality tends to peak in their 30s and 40s, and even after menopause. During menopause, women kind of take a break from it because their hormones are adjusting,
mhm,
okay, to not having to produce children anymore. But there are many women, I saw them in my practice, and I can speak for myself, that after menopause, we reawaken again,
ooh,
okay? And there's a lot of women who feel that way. And now, if their husband or partner, or if they're single, isn't on the same page, because lots of times men burn themselves out in their 20s and 30s.
really?
Oh yeah.
Which makes
And
sense.
yeah, because that's the way we kind of set it up for guys, like go out and get it, go out and get it, and telling girls don't give it, don't give it. I mean, we
Mhm,
we set up this whole dynamic to cause
mhm.
conflict from the very beginning.
Yeah, a lot of
But
friction within
a
our
lot of friction.
structure. Yeah.
And if guys, have, use up a lot of their energy, there's a certain energy that is needed to be able to, to have sexual intercourse.
Mhm.
Um, then they start having problems in their 50s. And so then again, we have a little bit of conflict of women ready to go and guys kind of like, oh, I guess I need that little pill.
Mm,
But
I
that little pill can um, cause problems with some men,
yeah,
as well. So
yeah.
there's those issues, but I don't think the need for intimacy ever goes away.
Mm. And I may have said something wrong because I noticed you corrected me there, and I think that's what we're trying to get to with this episode is people think that it goes away and it never goes away.
No.
No.
Right.
Well,
So let's talk about that sexuality over the age of 60, because like Kanan mentioned earlier, I think a lot of people just have it stuck in their head that as you age, you just don't have that desire anymore. And I know that's not true. So can you shed some light on that?
well, the hormones do shift as we get older. And one thing I've observed about men is that some of them, when their testosterone goes down, they do lose a certain amount of interest, and they're not as aggressive in their dating
Mm,
because they don't have that drive. And
Mhm.
what drove them before? I mean,
testosterone.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And
And when you're
so,
young, you're like, it's like pouring out of you. It's like you got to do something with
right,
it. Uh,
right. And so a lot of people, in their 60s, I see they go back into the things that brought them joy even when they were younger. Maybe it's playing music, maybe it's art, maybe it's they go back into other things that feed their soul in a different way.
mm,
And that's okay too. But you know, sexual intercourse does change, as you get older. You have to be a little more patient and a little more creative.
mm,
And not all people want to have sexual intercourse as they get older, but they still want to be, like I said before, they still want to touch and feel close to somebody.
mhm.
So, I can't put everybody in one box. And then there's other people who their sex drive is there till the day they die, till their 90s.
Yeah, that's always interesting, whether it's a man or a woman, when they're like
Yeah,
89 years old and they're like, you could tell the sex is there. Like when I mean, you may see it too here in Southern California. You're in Central, right? I don't know
right,
if people are as
right.
frisky there, but we go to the beach and people are like in these tube tops and spaghetti tops, and the guys are shirtless riding their bikes, and they're like 70, 80, 90-year-old
Yeah,
guys, still
yeah.
acting very young. You mentioned passion before and hobbies and all that. Does that kind of like you get to an age where you're like, okay, I'm going to start exploring the things that made me happiest in my youth? Does that also push like the sexuality at the same time? Because if that's making you happy and you're filling your time with a hobby that just makes you feel alive and thriving, is
Right.
that also trickle into the sexuality?
Yes. Oh, most definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's just not as often anymore, but it doesn't mean it's not as important,
Mm,
and like I said, it can take intimacy could be doing a hobby together, be doing something together with someone else.
mm,
And I also found in my age group that there's a lot of women who are choosing just to cohabit themselves, not as in part, as in sexual relationships, but like when Andrea was saying, people don't want to be alone. People are finding different ways to live with other people so they don't have to be alone.
Mhm.
So that's happening as well.
Is it like the show? I know this is gonna sound crazy, but is it like the show Gracie or Frankie and Gracie or
Yeah,
Gracie and Frankie?
yeah,
Okay.
I've seen that. Yeah, I mean, that's a little crazier,
Yeah,
but
of
of
course.
course, they have a lot of money, and
Yeah,
it's
they live
it's
in
nice to have a
Malibu.
beach house on the ocean.
Yeah, right?
Come on, that's really great. But there's a lot, especially on the Central Coast or where it's more expensive, that people need to live with each other just to be able to survive.
Yeah.
And so I see a lot of that. But yeah, I really didn't, I've been in love and my relationships have gotten better and better.
Mhm.
And, the love of my life, I was in my early 60s, and it broke open my heart. And I never knew what all the fuss was about, or people just say, oh my God, I'm just sobbing over this relationship.
Mhm.
And so love can come into your life at any age. And just because we're older, it doesn't mean that we still don't have hearts that need to be nourished and need to be loved. I mean, it's such a fallacy.
Yeah.
Just because our body looks older doesn't mean we still don't have the same needs as anybody else.
Yeah.
So I
Um,
want to I want to bring us back to the conversation about sex over 60, because I find it really interesting, and I think it's such an important conversation to have because, like you mentioned earlier, men and women move at different paces, right? Women in their 30s and 40s, their sex drive can increase, and I've seen personally that men in their 40s, their sex drive can decrease
yeah.
into their 50s. I've never been with anyone older than that, so I don't know.
I have.
Oh,
But I found it really interesting that they did a national poll on healthy aging, and 40% of people aged 65 to 80 are sexually active. To
Mm,
me, that seems like a really high number
I'm
for
not
that
shocked.
age group.
well, because I think it's your definition of sexually active. You know, it. Well,
Well, the
I don't
study defined it
know what we
as
can say on the
sexual.
show, but it's not just intercourse.
Mhm.
Okay, there's lots of different ways to be intimate with somebody, and we call it sexual activity.
No, this study called sexual activity as either intercourse or oral sex.
Oh,
It's
okay,
your
all
standard
right,
definition.
okay.
I
Well,
was wondering if it's because of like retirement homes or like those tall buildings that that in a lot of places. Because to me, it's like a dorm situation. It's
yes,
Mhm.
like it's a throwback to if they experience that, it's a throwback to like their 20s, and they're in this place where everybody is either single or they're married for a while, and it's like, hey, let me creep down the hall and see what she's doing or he's doing,
yeah,
and you're not thinking about STDs and babies, so it's like,
right. Yeah, that is the point. And also that men do have a pill now that can help with a lot of the sexual activity, and men do use it quite a bit. And I would say from their late 40s on, men are using like Viagra or some form of Viagra.
Mhm.
Um, and
now
women,
ours. Go
yeah,
ahead. I'm sorry. Go
okay.
ahead.
No. So, and then women also can use certain products to help them not make intercourse so painful, because that's the reason why a lot of women um, haven't wanted to have sex as they get older, because the estrogen helps them, be more moist, and then they can have more pleasurable sex. So there are, and the other thing is that people are taking better, some adults are taking better care of themselves. And that's going to make a big difference of whether you can be sexual in older age.
Yeah. People are looking a lot younger at
Yes.
older ages now. Like I'm seeing some people that they're like are 80 and they're 90. I'm like, she looks like she's 40, maybe
Yeah.
even 30 something. And it's,
Yeah.
thank you, science, I guess. Do you find yourself being more sexually experimentative? I don't know if
Um,
that's the word, like trying new things that you didn't try, let's say when you were married or you were single.
right. Yeah. And I think it depends on your partner, how open and what kind of a relationship you have with them.
Mhm.
It because there's a lightening up of, you can laugh at yourself more. There's just not all the pressure, you
Ah,
know?
yeah.
And if you have good communication with that person and you can talk about things, I think that's the biggest turn on anyways.
Mm.
And so that stimulates, better sex. It may not be as long to do, you
But it's
know,
impactful.
it's impactful and I would say more fun,
Mhm.
Do you find that men in their 60s or 50s and 60s are able to have conversations about sex versus, when they're younger, it's hard for men to talk about it. They probably weren't even taught to really talk about it, to be honest. But now in 50s and 60s, do you find that they're able to have conversations about it?
Again, that would be, I don't think the majority do, but I think the men I've chosen, because I want somebody who's more aware of themselves on an awareness level, that I can talk, because if I can't talk to somebody, that I probably won't be dating them for very long.
Yeah.
But from what I've heard from, there are parts of my generation that are pretty stuck. And if you haven't done your work of healing old wounds in relationships, it can be very stagnant, and people can be very stuck in their older years. And those are the people that even look older.
Yeah. Yeah.
So doing your work and healing yourself through all the relationships that you've gone through, whether it's one or five or how many, that's going to, I really truly believe, predict how you're going to age and how you're going to be able to communicate and be intimate in your later years. Because if you don't do that work, the mystery of life is beautiful, but we also have the shadow side. We also have the side of ourselves. We have to have that willingness to look at, well, what went wrong and how can I grow from that? And do I want to bring that back into my life again? And for me, it was always, nope, I don't want that back. I want to work on myself. So my next relationship, even friendships or whatever kind of relationships we're talking about, they're better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the key. You have to keep healing those old wounds, or you're just going to keep attracting the same thing.
Well, I
Over
think
and
that
over.
applies for any age, right?
Yeah.
Well, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if you're 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 100, right? If you don't heal those old wounds, you're going to keep attracting the same thing over and over again. Something that occurred to me recently was that the baby boomers, in particular, adults over 50, learned how to communicate pre-Facebook, pre-texting, pre-smartphones, and honestly, pre-internet.
Yeah.
Not trying to make you sound prehistoric, but
some days I feel it.
I'm curious, as far as when it comes to dating now, how does that affect dating? Because we get on, my generation and younger, we get on dating apps and it's second language to us to text. It's just what we do. We kind of grew up in it. So as someone who is over the age of 60, how does that affect your ability to date? Because this isn't second nature for you guys to use all this technology.
I don't like it. And I've always met people, I I do not have good luck on the sites. It's hard to read it between the lines. I read a person's body language. I listen to their voice. I watch how comfortable they are, and I listen to, basically, is there an attraction? I
Yeah.
mean, and at this age, I have to tell you, I don't have the time for all this texting back and forth. I mean, I don't mind a few texts, but most of the men I have been involved with, they'll pick up the phone and call me,
Yeah.
because I can listen to their tone. You can't listen to a
Mhm.
tone, and a lot of people misconstrue what somebody's even trying to say,
Hmm.
in a text. And I think it has its purpose. I mean, I do use text a lot. But in relationship, I rather see the person or just text to say, hey, where do you want to meet? We want to meet here, there. That's great. But to
Right,
have a
right.
conversation that holds any meaning or connection, no.
Yeah.
It's funny because the millennial generation really relies on texting through dating apps. In fact, some of them won't even get off of the app and give them their real phone number. There's a
That's
lot of fear
scary.
around it,
Ugh.
right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
then your generation is like, I can't manage this app crap. So let's just get off of it. You call me like an adult and we'll have a phone conversation and then we'll figure out where we're going to meet for the first time. And that's usually done within a few weeks versus the younger generation that's still texting a month or two later.
Yeah.
Right. Well, with all the ghosting that's going on, I mean, I just text somebody on one of the apps that just kept texting me, and then I realized his language was very poor. It didn't match the way he looked. And the minute you say, well, why don't you give me a call, you don't hear from him.
Oh, spam,
Yeah.
spammers.
Damn. Wow. You have that
Yeah.
too on there. Christ.
Yeah. So that's something that I'm really not interested in, you
So
know.
are you dealing with like, so you mentioned the whole millennial thing of how they ghost and whatnot. This is really happening. Like I would imagine this is all just happening with like 20 and 30-year-old. There's
Oh
like
no.
50,
It's
60-year-old guys out here ghosting people
oh,
and texting.
oh my gosh.
How sad.
Ask my daughter. I had one. She says, "Oh, Ma, you need to go on." I don't know. That was maybe about a year ago or 6 months ago. I forgot.
Mhm.
And I was texting with this guy for 3 weeks, and he really seemed like we were having some good texting, right? And then I finally said, "Wait a minute." And he lived about 50 miles away. I said, "Why don't we just meet, you
Mhm.
know, and
Mhm.
have a conversation, or call me?" Never heard from him.
Wow. It's like, I guess
Yeah.
people are becoming afraid. They're so afraid of rejection now that the thought of meeting someone in person, I can't really explain it. I'm just trying to make an excuse for them, but it's just
Yeah.
so. What this is probably like a cliche question, but I have to ask. What advice would you give yourself in your 20s out of all the wisdom that you've acquired over the last few years that you've been alive? What is the one piece of wisdom that you would give to your younger self as far as dating and relationships?
Hmm. Um, to listen to my instincts when I'm with somebody, to be willing to look at something differently, and to, really listen to the other person and take them into consideration more. Um, yeah, I think it's basically to be open, to be curious with somebody, and to listen to my instincts, because if I would have followed my instincts in a lot of cases, I would have lessened the heartache, I
Mm.
think, that I have felt in some relationships, because that inner sense, that knowing who you are. I guess my biggest advice is know who you are, because when you know who you are, you can access that inner wisdom to know whether this person is right for you or not. Um, a- and it's not so bad to be with yourself until you find the right person, because, um, you've got to get to know yourself first, because you can't stand in your truth with somebody else if you don't know who you are.
This is true.
Yeah. So that would be my,
That is a wonderful way to end this interview.
Oh, it's so quick. No,
I
I was
know.
having
Oh, that was
fun.
fast. Yeah.
Well, we can always do a part two. We like that.
Yeah.
Don't we,
You know,
Katie?
I wanted to mention, because we've been talking this whole time, and right over your shoulder, I love that you have your My Gratitude Journal. And you mentioned in the pre-show that you've created. Where can I get that journal? It's My Gratitude,
My
and it has like
website.
little heart. Your website. Okay, tell me
Yeah,
more.
on my website, there's a couple different ones. This is a hard-covered one.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few spiral-bound ones if, some people don't like hard-covered, but in my program, one of the weeks it's a 16-week program that I do with my clients.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the weeks they are learning about how to have a gratitude journal and the importance of having a gratitude journal. And Denise kind of touched on it a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
It's really important for you to know yourself and to really understand who you are. But the gratitude journal is so that you can be grateful for who you are and see the positives and the joy in your life and not just focus on what's lacking.
Yeah.
So yes, you can find that on my website at datesmartersexier.com.
Awesome. I feel like you nailed it when you said that's basically what Denise has been talking about this whole episode, which is being grateful for who you are. Because I think even past the age of 30, 40, 50, whatever your age is, you can really only be as happy as you allow yourself to be.
That's right.
And you can only be as young as you see yourself. I think for a lot of people who get older and act older and complain, it's their mentality. And one thing I would say about Denise, you have a very youthful spirit. And I'm not saying youthful as in you're trying to be young, but
Yeah.
obviously you're always self-evaluating, self-reflecting, looking at how you contribute to life. And that alone keeps you young, because as long as you're looking at, I can change this about myself, or I can adapt this, or let me look at this a little differently. It keeps you young. It keeps you fresh. And no matter what age you are, you can have the best sex ever, the best dating life ever, the best relationships. And I want to say thank you for reminding us that just because you're over the age of 60 does not mean love and sex ends.
No. Keep your innocence. Remember, keep yourself open.
Yes. Yes. Andrea, I'm sorry.
Awesome. Well,
me.
thank you again for doing this interview with us. I appreciate it. And I really wanted to be able to share the wisdom you bestow on me with the world. Ultimately, right? All of our listeners now get to hear what I get to hear on a regular basis. And I feel very lucky and blessed that I have you as my mother and as my teacher. So for all of those listeners out there, if you have any questions or if you have a situation you would like answered on our show, we will keep it anonymous. You can send us an email at datesmartersexier@gmail.com and we will answer your question or your concern on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Denise.
Thank you for being with us, Kanan.
It was an honor.
Until next time.